So I'm going to give you a little bit of a talk today, just to highlight some of the things that the university does to be able to help move products to market. So a little bit of background, I am the director of an office that we established at the university called the Office of Environmental Nanosafety. And the role of that is to help some of our industrial partners and also help the government in coming to terms with how to do the regulatory environment surrounding nanomaterials. And we have a large number of funding partners. But I'm going to, I think everybody's pretty well aware that the regulatory environment surrounding nanomaterials is fairly complex because it crosses many acts and regulations, and these are some examples of just the Canadian regulatory environment that we have for nanomaterials. Right, so just in the environmental area, we have new substances notification regulations. So if you're producing more than a kilogram, you're supposed to have some sort of regulation, what's called Section 71. There's persistence and bioaccumulation regulations. We know that there's the Fisheries Act, Oceans Act, agricultural products, pest control. So all of these are regulatory components that require us to have some sort of testing to make sure our products have environmental safety. And if you're producing drugs and you have the Health Canada Acts, there's a whole bunch of regulatory requirements under those particular aspects. And then there's hazardous products. If you're really making something specifically to be hazardous, you have controlled products regulations, or WMIS, of course, is another aspect. So the whole regulatory environment is quite complex. And when sort of nano became known as opposed to just working in a material science, we knew that there was a lot of products that were coming out onto market. And so as products are coming into market, we've had this huge investment by governments around the world in terms of trying to get products out to market. And this is, of course, what we want to do to drive our knowledge economy. Unfortunately, it takes a long time to generate a lot of environmental and occupational health and safety data, and it costs a lot of money. It costs thousands to millions of dollars. And many SMEs, even large companies, have a pretty good idea, but SMEs really don't realize the potential costs that are associated, and they'll put this into their financial plan, right? And even if you have that, then it takes a long time for that any data, environmental health and safety data, to be analyzed and make a decision made. And often it's so slow that it's beyond the time frame of that particular technology. You've moved on to a new technology. And this creates a serious problem for both Environment Canada, for industry, and for the companies, because it exposes you to long-term liability for companies employing technologies if you have adverse environmental effects or environmental health effects. And so a number of years ago, in response to this, there was this is back in 2006, 2007, there was a concerted effort by the Government of Canada through NSERC and the NRC through National Institute of Nanotechnology and Environment Canada, the three funding partners, to essentially establish a group of scientists across the country who could help address some of these issues and establish the baseline or the expertise in Canada so that we can function in this way. And I was one of the co-leaders, along with a scientist at the Biotechnology Research Institute named Jeff Sanahara, and we had a number of different scientists from 6 universities and 3 NRC institutes to try and address these issues and come to a conclusion in terms of how we can do risk assessment in terms of a legal and regulatory framework in order to allow companies to have some of that confidence going forward that they could develop their products without having a serious liability. And so when we first started, these were the major materials that are primarily used or that were thought to be the largest tonnage. And so these are the materials under an OECD, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, sponsorship program. And these were fairly large-scale materials. But we know that, as you just heard and other things, there are tremendous numbers of materials now coming onto market or in development. And each one of them would create a serious problem because we just don't have the capacity for testing. And that's the hardest part. So we know that there's a lot of coatings that might be used in a variety of different applications. In agriculture, we have everything from food packaging, novel surfactants or replacement surfactants within pesticide and herbicide applications, some active systemics that I'll explain to you in a little while, soil mobility modifiers so you can have lower application rate and less mobility, and this could help reduce your your cost, but also increase your yield. Long-range transport of micronutrients and leaching inhibitors. These are a variety of things that I know are being tested, and I have aspects of research that I've corroborated with on these particular products. Nanocrystalline cellulose, you'll hear as a major product that's being promoted by the Canadian forest products industry. There's also decontamination of wastewater techniques, sensors. So there is pretty well anything that you want to do. It's like the old saying, BASF, we don't make things, we make things better. Nanotechnology is intended to make things better, including things like environmental site remediation, for example. And if you look at the area that I do a lot of work in, environmental remediation, these are just some of those materials that are being characterized or tried right now as mechanisms for site remediation. And so each one of these materials, you'll take the core material and then you'll do a functionalization on the outside to increase or decrease some mobility, to be able to put it into a polymer, to be able to put it in. And so each and every time you do one of these, does this require a new environmental and occupational health and safety regulation? It seems a little difficult to imagine because we simply will not have the capacity. And so we have groundwater and wastewater treatments. These are obviously big ones. But treatment for volatile organic compounds is also something for brownfield remediation, for example, and things that are being promoted quite actively. So within that NNBNI, our main goal was to establish that we have the capacity in Canada to be able to help industry to work towards these. And so through the Office of Environmental Nanosafety, there are a number of labs, and it's expanded outside of that across Canada, who do a variety of different testing platforms that if you work directly with industry, then you can provide an ability to have what I would call benign design. In other words, you take your product, you do some initial testing before you spend a whole bunch on a large contract, and you spent years developing a product to find out that it's not going to pass regulatory approval. So with a give and take through information exchange and testing, you can have multiple testing platforms that are acceptable to Environment Canada, things like some of the earthworms, zebrafish, amphibian. So within the OENS, we do have the capacity for all these types of assays, and they all give specific and separate information that can be used in environmental health and safety regulation and testing. And in terms of immunological models, where you can look things for the mammalian system if you're developing life science technologies, fish models for more environmental technologies, whole animals, embryonic testing, some cell-based testing. So we have the suite of testing and the capacity now within Canada to be able to facilitate this. And importantly, I was just at a workshop in Vancouver, and we are in our early stages, probably I would say within the next 6 months to a year, really focusing on getting some of those decision tools out to the regulatory agencies to be able to look at the core product, look at the functionalizations, and make preliminary Class 1, Class 2, Class 3 approvals for be able to look at how we can allow certain technologies to go forward without additional testing, but other ones might require testing. So this allows to provide early stage clarity on testing and regulatory environment for the innumerable unknown materials which are coming down the line. In my own particular lab, I have a large lab. I have 17 people working in my group, but we do a whole bunch of stuff, and I call our safe by design or benign design characteristics. We look at the colloid interactions and their interactions in the biological systems, both in the environmental space and the biology within the animal. Importantly, we're probably one of the leading labs in the world in terms of validation and control for our test methods, so we actually know what we're doing with them, because often if you just apply these systems, these materials as colloids, they don't behave the same as soluble materials. They interact and cause unknown effects on the assays themselves and give you false data. And so it's important that you engage somebody who has a good understanding of the validation and control of those test methods if you want to really get to the heart of the matter and you want to validate it, because Environment Canada and the US EPA are really looking for that now. They've been told to look for it, and this is something that's very important when you're trying to get through any EH&S testing. We have a variety of different ones, and importantly, I have direct interactions through Environment Canada, and this helps. The US EPA, I know my colleagues in the United States are not allowed to talk directly to researchers. It has to be arm's length. But in Canada, we're lucky enough that we can have a direct interaction and a back and forth with Environment Canada, and this certainly helps us a great deal. So I'm going to give a little bit of a case study just very quickly. I've just one of them. This is Vive Crop Protection Services is a company that exists in Toronto. They're one of our early partners right from the very beginning. They started out as Northern Nanotech, which is a quantum dot, which was cadmium-based, cadselenide, cadtelleride type products with a few employees. And through their original research, they realized that this was not going to be a large market share, large revenue generating company. So then they changed their products to a variety of different other type quantum dots based on a variety of different metals as metal core facilities, and they were developing this as a product. And one or two of the products actually had some serious side effects, which helped in devise and determined that they wouldn't be using that in further because they wouldn't have the application because it wouldn't pass the regulatory tests. And in fact, one of the materials that we tested and we asked for as part of our back and forth in terms of controls turned out to be very interesting in that it works very well as a crop protection active systemic for herbicide and pesticide application. And so now, working with this Toronto-based SME, right, we validated their materials, and they recently, just a few months ago, received US EPA approval based on the material and data that we provided as a consortium to be able to use that as a replacement surfactant for systemic herbicide usage within a broad-scale agricultural application. So this was very important to the company. They were very happy with this because it provided a lot of information to them and at a very low cost for the large amount of information that was done. So the benefits of this early stage research is allows that rapid initial feedback. So as you're developing materials, you can get at least some preliminary tests, and so engage the universities and these people within the NNBNI or anybody else. It doesn't really matter as long as they know what they're doing. Yeah, you can have access to get government matching funds programs. Obviously, that's one of the draws that a lot of the companies, the SMEs, like because we have the personnel. When you're marketing or selling your product for raising capital to either venture capitalists or to the general public, what you want to do is demonstrate that you have that environmental sustainability. And you want to have that comfort in development, knowing you're likely to get necessary approvals. Not for sure, but you're always likely. And this allows you to also plan for those those costs that are going to come up. And if you're interested more in nanomaterial safety and design, we have a conference in Banff in September, which you're welcome to attend. But importantly, we are also running a workshop. So if you have interested employees who want to know a little bit about how to do the testing, how to do the characterization, we have some world experts in characterization, Jim Ranville and Richard Handy Jim from the Colorado School of Mines, Richard from Plymouth University, Steve Claney from Clemson, and Antonio Nogueira from Aveiro in Portugal. And this is a hands-on nanomaterial characterization workshop, which will be running in Banff in September, just immediately prior to the meeting. So you're welcome to contact me for that. Thank you very much.